Hi, I'm Matt May. I work for Insight Partners, private equity VC firm out of New York. I run something called the Lean Scaleup program. That's to help scale ups remove the obstacles to scale and growth. Co-author with my colleague here, Pablo Dominguez, of What a Unicorn Knows. Quick background, spent about a decade with Toyota, spent about a decade with a gentleman by the name of Roger Martin learning strategy. Love to mountain bike, do a little bit of road biking, mostly mountain biking. Struggling tennis player, live in California. Over to you, Pablo.
Thanks, Matt. Pablo Dominguez, also with Insight Partners, responsible for supporting our advisory teams. Have been really focused on Salesforce effectiveness my entire career. I have a little bit of consulting to public companies, a startup, and now here at Insight for 5 years supporting over 500 of our portfolio companies. Originally from Mexico, grew up in Texas, and now spending time in the Northeast, where I also mountain bike like Matt and try to enjoy smoking meat when I can.
Excellent.
On a
Excellent.
smoker,
Well,
like not like, you know.
yeah, yeah. You're doing the marijuana, he's doing the meat. Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. The fantastic book, guys. Why did you feel compelled to put in the hard yards to get this out?
I'll start. I am a previous author, so this is my sixth book. And I actually thought I'd never write another book because I didn't have anything to say. But Pablo and I have been working together well over a decade, and the past 5 years focused on high-tech software scale-ups. The ability to apply this lean thinking approach to business was unique, and I credit Pablo for being the innovator and pointing it toward the go-to-market part of the world, which I was not all that familiar with, honestly. And it has worked so well, and we have such measurable results that it felt time to synthesize what we have been doing into a set of basic guiding principles that, if applied the right way, the results are replicable. So it was worth getting it out and scaling up our own processes and principles.
Don't you just mean you've given the secret sauce to all of your competitors then?
Well, you know what? I come from a Toyota background, and one of the questions I'm always asked, because my first book was about Toyota and my experience there, people always ask me, "Didn't Toyota get pissed off at you for writing that book?" I'm like, "No, you can walk into any Toyota factory you want. They'll give you a tour. They will show you all everything, how they do everything in a factory in any kind of operation. And the reason they'll do that is because by the time you take that, adopt it as a best practice or standardize it, there are a million ideas down the road."
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I know we were talking about Elon Musk earlier before actually started the podcast, right? I'm a proud owner of an electric vehicle. I think Elon gave away the blueprints for the Tesla vehicles over a decade ago, and
Yeah.
look how far behind everybody is. So I'm not sure. I think how we engage with our companies and the best practices we've accumulated doing this over 100 times is what makes it different. But again, to Matt's point, most of lean has been applied to product, to manufacturing, and no one's really started applying it holistically to go to market. And so we're actually happy to share that with the rest of the community because so much more can be gained with everybody optimizing go to market teams.
So, for those people who haven't read the book yet, maybe we should give a how does this apply? What is lean scale up, and what does it mean to apply this to go to market? And then we can probably dive into some examples.
Pablo, take it away.
Yeah, so so the book is called What a Unicorn Knows, and one thing we want to clarify is the principles that we've put together apply to any size company, right? Typically larger companies, and again, Matt and I worked together at a public company before, years ago. Sometimes innovation is lost, right? You get stuck in the cog of the machine, but the best public companies have built innovation centers or applied some of these lean principles to leapfrog their competitors. So this is not just for startups, it's not just for scale ups, it's for any company looking to sort of drive that innovation with lean principles. And so we picked scale as sort of the moniker. And so we have 5 principles, and we can go through them to basically show the best companies that have, been able to drive consistent growth, sustainable growth with innovation, are constantly thinking in a lean mentality. And so we help provide specific examples in the book. So this is not an academic book, right? We've provided templates that people can actually use and put to use, recommendations on how to hold workshops, etc. So regardless of the size of your team or organization, very applicable actually to many companies, whether you're a CEO or a CXO looking to drive additional growth.
Yeah, and to back up that point, it's kind of interesting. The company we work for, Insight Partners, has two sides to the house. One's the investment side, one is the advisory side. But what makes it unique is that we're all ex-operators. We're all
Uh-huh.
field personnel. So it's not book learned. We've always had these roles, whether it's a team lead, a facilitator, what have you. And so we come at it from a very practical standpoint. So there's nothing scholarly in this book at all. The fact that there is even kind of a model, a visual model. If you look at it in the book, it looks like it was drawn on the back of a napkin because it was. Because we're not scholars, we don't have all that fancy knowledge up top. So, but lean, to answer your question, lean is often misconstrued. So it's really the absence of waste. And you hear a lot right now about do more with less.
Yeah.
And it's really not that as much as do less to achieve more,
Okay.
which is a slight nuance on it. But if I were to substitute the word more with work, no one would sign up for lean. Like work more with less. Nobody would want to, do that. Nobody's going to lean in, pardon the pun, on that. So it's really about taking stuff away, doing less so that you can, kind of almost exponentially improve your impact.
Okay. Because otherwise, it's one of we do some. I do work occasionally with clients, and we look at what's happening to their revenue, and you go, okay, you're winning larger clients. That's good. Let's have a look at the margin as you win those larger clients. Oh, that's going down. And they go, no, but that's okay. You go, no, that's not okay, because that means as you get bigger, your margin's going to go down. And if you just draw those graphs out, ultimately you end up a large unprofitable business, which is not really a great place to be. And then
Exactly.
it's just happening under the covers, and they just aren't really aware of that happening. And
And a lot of
that's
that was
the
covered up. A lot of that happened during kind of COVID, where this rising tide lifted all the boats, right? And it
yeah.
was growth at any cost, and we will worry about that stuff later. And now that resources have become a little bit more limited, certainly more finite, so to speak, that becomes more important.
And I mean, at the beginning, you guys said, look, we're VC PE. So where do you sit? Are you late stage VC and then PE? Where do what sort of size checks are you writing in the?
Yeah, so we have Insight's been around over 27, 28 years. We're based in New York. We're a global firm with investments all over the world, primarily in B2B software, right? So we're not doing flying cars and that kind of stuff. It's B2B software with a little mix of B2B2C recurring revenue.
Okay.
Um, we don't do seed or pre-seed, but we do everything from Series A to buyouts, right?
Okay.
So as long as it's software and it's typically growth companies. But yeah, we've got the best investors in my mind on the software side. And to Matt's point, we're part of the advisory side that then the investors find the best companies and the best leaders. And once they agree to take Insight's money and we want to invest in them, the purpose of the advisory teams is really to help those companies scale, right? From
Yeah.
when you join the Insight portfolio until you exit, we're here to help you on that journey, whether it's hiring people, right? We have a very powerful talent team to helping with marketing or product or engineering, sales, post sales, even exit prep, or if there's M&A, very powerful team to basically help you drive that sustainable growth.
Fab. Well, look, let's dive in. What were the 5? what are these 5 things that you found that were across the 100 companies that you in the portfolio that you looked at that have shown, do these 5 things, can't fail?
Well, I wouldn't say can't fail, but
I'm only teasing you.
we certainly increase your odds of winning.
Yeah.
And so we kind of backed into it by looking at the things that get in the way of growth and scale, and kind of the physical forces, if you will, or at least metaphorically physical forces of drag, of
Uh-huh.
friction, of inertia, and of waste. And we kind of liken these, these scale up companies, high growth, rapidly growing, fast moving companies to a Formula One car, which faces the exact same forces. If you're a fan of Formula One, you know that there's a DRS system on every car. It'll wing in the back, and there are certain drag reduction zones where you can overtake your competitor, around the track. And so, uh, tackling those 4 forces, we assigned kind of a principled approach to each. So the first is, and as Pablo said, the acronym is SCALE. The first is strategic speed, and that tackles the restraining force of drag, and it's all about making strategic decisions more swiftly, and getting alignment in your organization so that you're very much in the draft of those at the head of the company. You can make quicker decisions, make quicker market moves, up, down, sideways. So that's the S. The C is constant experimentation. As Pablo mentioned, innovation often wanes when you take your eye off the very ball that brought you to the party in the first place, which is you're in the garage, you got a great idea, everything is quick test, MVP this, MVP that, and then all of a sudden you find your first product, you got your product market fit, and you begin to scale, and all of a sudden you start riding that cash cow, and you forget about that process that brought that first product. And gosh, if you're not careful, you become a one-trick pony.
Did you?
I'll probably
Did you?
take a couple of the next one. Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, did you? Is there a sense of what size? I certainly my anecdotal feeling is at about 100 employees, people are starting to think about efficiency, and that the efficiency things that they put in place sort of drive out the innovation because it's now all about predictability, ROI, which is the sort of opposite of innovation. If we knew it was going to work, it would have an ROI. Innovation sort of seems as though it's like we don't know it's going to work; it's a test, and people start focusing on. So, did you get a sense when you looked at it? Was that is it about 100, or was that is that not as clear cut as that for you?
It's not.
There's a little bit of science around that 100 number and Dunbar's number, which is
Mm.
150. So if you look at some of the more innovative companies out there, um, uh, Gore, for example, Gore
Yeah,
Associates, I'm sure you're familiar with them. As soon as a particular team or unit gets to 150, they'll split them off, right? Because over that number, the communication breaks down. There's so many layers, there's programs, and all of a sudden this program mentality and this budget thing happens, and I gotta fit my budget or I lose it. So I'm selling a program, and the whole approach becomes less innovative and more internal selling and selling up. So there is
yeah.
some, I don't know that we have a lot of science, Paulo, to the actual number, but there's certain inflection points. I think you're right.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think what we've seen is because I saw this in a public company that had over 60,000 employees. You've got to drive innovation through very strategic teams. Because again, once you hit a certain inflection point, you're right. You start to focus more on efficiency, process, right? And people lose sort of what got them there. And so leadership is key, right? Are you building a culture of constant experimentation and failure is okay? Or have you pivoted to like, hey, we can't afford to fail, and now we're not going to take risks, right?
Yeah.
So it's a fine balance of how much risk can you take? Where do you take the risk? Where are you willing to experiment, or does everybody experiment? Because not everybody you hire as you start to scale also has that same mentality, right? So how are you onboarding and training people to think the way you wanted to run the company? You'll always lose that as you scale. What we've seen with the winners is the CEOs, the executive team have maintained that culture, and or incubated it. right? Here's our
Okay.
innovation team. They're going to focus on incubation. Look at what Google does, right? They allocate 10% of people's time every week to just thinking time and focusing on innovation, not your job, right? So they don't lose that from a culture perspective.
It's interesting because I see a number of PE backed businesses that I've worked with, and actually they're almost the sort of risk aversion in PE also can drive out innovation in some of their portfolio businesses.
Yeah,
You know,
because it's
concentrate on profitability.
exactly. And
Uh,
you can still be focused on, again, the two North Stars for a company, right? Are top line and bottom line, right? And I think you can still be focused on profitability and be innovative. Back to the first letter, scale, right? Strategic speed. It's not just about speed, right? It's, if you think about strategy and the core of strategy, the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. That's what Michael Porter said, right? And people sometimes think it's different. Like, so let's think about the current environment we're in. How many companies are really thinking, well, hey, maybe I shouldn't be rolling out 5 products. Maybe I shouldn't try and go into every single market in EMEA or APAC or go into the US, right? Let me try and be more targeted and focused. We think that more will drive growth versus being much more focused, right? Netflix has a principle called the Canada principle. We talk about this in the book, where they had an opportunity early on to go into Canada, right? And it was clear, huge market next to the US. It can't be that hard. But they very strategically said, no, this is going to redeploy resources because there's language changes, right? Like there is French in Canada, it's not just English. They'd have to change the product. And they stayed and focused on the US, and they actually grew more quickly by focusing on the US versus going into a net new market, which you'd go, there's no way that's possible, right? So again, back to Matt's point, it's all about making the right choices versus trying to, I think companies spread themselves too thin by not being strategic and go, we're going to do, SMB, mid-market, enterprise, international. We're going to, we're going to leverage channel partners, and that just dilutes the focus versus like, what is your core and what can you actually do very well?
well, also, you say those six things and you go, does that business really have six talented people who have nothing else to do? Right, and
Exactly.
that's where the strategy completely falls over, because it's like we're going to do these six things and we don't have the six people, or we do, they're good, but they're actually got full-time jobs already.
Yeah. And that's
Um,
that's where, well, let's do more with less. Matt said that
yeah,
before. We hear that a lot, right? Do more with less versus lean for us is, do less to achieve more. And that seems
yeah.
counterintuitive, but we've seen it work. And obviously Netflix saw it work, right? They were very focused.
Well,
Um,
I mean, back before I did a European expansion a few years ago, I remember talking to the guys at Dell, and they had gone into a few years ago. The guy was talking. He said, "Look, we went into 5 European countries. A year later, we were out of all five."
yeah,
Right? And he said, "So then we went, okay, what did we learn? We went back into one, and after a year, we were number one in that country. Whereas after a year, we were like 12th in 5 countries, and all we'd
right.
created was noise and cost. We
Yeah,
hadn't done anything successfully. And also, he said, we also made the mistake of not having somebody senior enough's head on the block,
yeah.
right? And so then when they did it the second time, it was like we had the right guy. If it didn't work, he was toast. So that sort of senior sponsorship was important as well.
I'm
So then
glad you
we then
brought that
we
up.
then we then
Yeah,
picked one country, and we went into the Netherlands, and
yeah,
that
no, that's
worked really
perfect,
well.
right? Because like when we talk about constant experimentation, this is part of it, right? Companies think, well, I'll pick a US company going into Europe, right? I have to pick 5 countries, right? Because they all have high TAM, our competitors are there, et cetera. No, experiment. Land in the UK first or France, wherever you think you have the highest likelihood. Test it out. Can you try it, right? Prove it out.
Land in
Then go
land
decide.
in land in France.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
yeah. France and Germany should not be the first places you land. Just
Yeah.
no offense to the French or the Germans.
Just more complicated. You're right.
Yeah, exactly, right? But people think, oh, especially Americans, right? People think, oh, it's Europe. It's just all the same, and they don't realize there's work councils and different, languages at times. They're like, oh, everybody speaks
Well,
English. Like,
I remember having this conversation with my colleagues, and I'm like, okay, I think we should put the infrastructure in Portsmouth. We're on this call, and the guy says, well, what about Dublin? I said, okay. So it's in a different country, over the sea. They have a different currency. But other than that, you probably didn't do geography
Sounds
at
good.
school. So, let's move on from you guys over there picking where we put this infrastructure. There's
But
no point in having
it's there on the map.
it's pretty close. It's pretty close. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the local knowledge can be really impactful. So
Yep.
what's A,
Matt, you're about to do
Pablo?
it on
Oh,
this.
accelerated value. So,
Okay.
we all our work, most of all our work is with B2B companies, software, and this notion of time to value is paramount to reducing, and they're all subscription businesses, right? So that's what SaaS is. Um, Time to value is paramount, and what gets in the way of allowing a customer to really truly realize value quickly um, has a lot to do with not understanding the job they're trying to get done with whatever tool or solution it is that you're selling. So accelerating value is shrinking that time to value, shrinking time to revenue by taking a look at what Clayton Christensen call a job to be done. It's irrespective of whatever it is you're selling. There is a deeper job that someone is trying to get done and a desired outcome. And if we fail to align and understand what those desired outcomes are, we're going to experience churn. We're going to experience desertion, all the things that could make a business that we invest in fail. So that is the A.
Okay. And as you were talking, I was thinking, get the software spreads more deeply in the organization. If we can get time to value, there's probably something that says if they're not seeing it quickly, they'll churn. If it's an annual contract, they're just not going to renew because they had it for 3 months. We think we've got the revenue, but actually, if we look at the usage patterns, nobody used it. It's just not going. We're not going to get year two.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, did we oversell something and to the wrong people to when it's coming up for renewal, people are questioning like, why are we using this, right? So you clearly didn't sell me on value, because if your product, people should not be going, should we keep this? They should say, we can't live without this, right? I can't do my
Yeah,
job without this. And so that to Matt's point, do you really understand the problem the customer's trying to solve? Do you understand your pain points? And does your solution solve that, right? And if it does, you're in a great position, right? High LTV, great financials. But if not, that's where we're seeing, products churn or downsell, right?
yeah. I was interested in buying some Martech recently, and the sales guy I was talking to said, "I can't sell it to you." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, we've got 97% renewal rate, and we're heading towards an IPO, and you don't have the infrastructure to get the value out of our product, and therefore I can't sell it to you." I thought that was really ballsy, but that's a
Yeah.
great example of what you're saying. It's like, be really clear who your core customer is.
Yeah.
Don't let the sales rep sell something to somebody that they're not going to get value from because
Yeah. By the way,
they're
that's
just gonna hate
impressive.
you.
The best reps and the best managers will walk away from deals they know are not right for the customer, but also for themselves, right? Versus like, we'll deal with it later, right? Like the last thing you want is a customer writing you buy this Martech and then you tell your friends like, yeah, this was useless, but well, no, maybe you weren't ready for it, right? So
Yeah,
great call out there.
yeah. What's the L?
Yeah, so lean is all about process, right? Lean process, and I love this one. Um, and this is sort of where Matt and I started over a decade ago applying lean to GTM because if you think about go to market, you go from awareness of a customer learning about your product to they renew, right? Or they buy more stuff. And all in there, there is a marketing process, there is a sales process, there's a post-sales process implementation, there's handoffs, finances involved, legals involved. Those processes are riddled. Matt said it before with waste, like literally riddled with waste. We've done this, I don't know, Matt, over 75, close to 100 times. And I will bet my salary on this and Matt's can guarantee, because it's always happened. It's always happened, Dominic. So can guarantee a minimum of 20% improvement in the quote to cash process simply by removing waste, not spending a dime on people, not spending a dime on technology. Once you add tech, it improves, but minimum 20% guaranteed.
And is that so? Is that 20% in any sort of direction? Because you could be generating. You could get you could be generating your CAC to LTV ratio could be better. The time to close could be better. Is it just in some direction you'll find 20%?
Correct. It could be conversion rates, handoffs. Um, Legal takes 12 weeks to approve for no reason. You name it.
And we set those
Just
targets high up front, right? So in any direction. So this always begins with what's the bogey, right? What is it, the gap? What's the gap, Mr. or Mrs. Manager or senior executive that you want to close? And then then we'll have a working team, cross-functional team, address those goals, map out the process. Since they're the ones that identify the problem and test out a solution, there's kind of built-in buy-in. And it's run as an experiment, so it's kind of a no-brainer, so to speak. But yeah, without fail, at least 20%. And going in, we will not take a project where the goal is something like 5 or 10% improvement, because you can game the system when they're that low, right? You can work longer, work harder, stay longer, figure out workarounds to get that lift, because there's that much slack in whatever process you're looking at. So we set it higher, so you have to think differently and subtractively at the same time.
what are your best waste basket moments where you found something and it's like, because people always feel a little bit silly from when you point it out from the outside, because they're like, yes, you're right. Like, how didn't we see that?
Well, what's funny is we don't point it out. They point it out.
Okay. Because
Right?
they already know it. It's just somehow the wrong person's saying it and nobody's taken action.
Well, yeah, that's the beautiful thing about how we run the workshops, right? And again, that's the power of the book is we're giving you the frameworks, is when you solve these issues, you typically solve them in a silo, right? Our implementation takes too long, or the handoff between sales and post sales is ineffective. So what do? All right, let's talk to the salespeople. Why? What we do is we bring salespeople together, post sales, finance, legal, marketing, customer success together to say, hey, map out the process. Like, and what actually happens. And when they map it out, they start to go, wait, why do you do that after I give it to you? I don't need you to do that. I don't know. Like when I started, that was in my training. Like someone said to do that. And they go, well, that takes a week. We don't need to do that, right? And you just keep going and they go, holy cow, like, why are we doing these things? Right? And then they go from there and you say, okay, now that you saw what you do, and none of you clearly know why you're doing these things, what should the ideal process be? And that's where the removal comes from. They go, don't need this, don't need this, don't do this. And these are all people that do the jobs, right? That's where Matt's awesome at doing this is you don't have the executives, right? You can't have executives in here because they don't know. They're up here at, in La La Land. These are people on the ground going, this is the job I do. Let me tell you why it's difficult, not you, Mr. or Mrs. Manager.
Do you know, I used to run a CRM consultancy business, and we did a lot of work like that. The thing that terrifies me the most is I see clients all the time doing some sort of tech implementation, and they don't do that workshop that you're describing first. What they do is they take their shitty process and they hard code it in
They
to
automate
make it impossible to change later.
Yeah.
And it's like, you couldn't take the 10 weeks out if you wanted to, because then you'd have to spend another, $200,000 on consultancy fees just to rewrite the code.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And that's actually where we sometimes engage, right? People say, hey, we're implementing a CLM or a CPQ solution.
And
we're
you go,
like,
before you do that, let's help you. Let's help you before you waste all of that money.
don't take shitty process and automate shitty process. And now it looks pretty in a CPQ, but it's, not suboptimal. So That's always a good entry before you're going to implement those tools. Like, is your process optimal? And 9 times out of 10, it's not.
Well,
And
and
yeah,
and what I like is that you're saying, look, it doesn't take the executive team. You just go and get the people on the front line. And actually, so often what you're doing is you're giving them an opportunity to scratch an itch. Many times people have got like 37 stupid rules. I was with a
yeah,
client recently and I said, okay, we've got the CEO here. I need somebody to tell me something that he needs to fix. And somebody said, oh, we've hard coded in that the minimum time that we can bill for is a day. And we've got all this stuff that takes less than a day and we can't close the project off and bill the client. And you
unbelievable.
and you and you're going, well, there was obviously a meeting, and in that meeting, the people who did that thought that made sense, so like it's in. And so the CEO said, well, that's ridiculous. What does it need to be? And they went hours. He went, okay, let's move it from days to hours. Turns to
Yeah.
the senior guy from tech team, make that happen. They're like, they were cheering because they were so frustrated that and you're right, in your ivory tower, you very often don't.
You don't have that visibility. And we tend to think that people in positions of power, whether it's the COO, right, CEO, the head of sales, marketing, HR, it doesn't really matter who, that they have all this knowledge and they have the answers because they've got the experience. And that's not true, right? Like the people that know what needs to get done are the people doing the jobs. And, Matt, I think that was the Toyota culture, right? Like they wanted people that were doing the tasks to, stop the line or come back with thoughts on like how to do things better. I mean, it goes back to constant experimentation. And we talked about experimentation earlier. When we finish this workshop, those people present then to the executive team and say, hey, we can take 20% out or 25% or 30% out. Great. Go test it. Before we go change the entire company, do it for 2, 3 months. Let's see if it works. Guess what? It always works, right? Because they're changing their jobs. Then you roll it out to the whole company and you see huge gains, right? We had one company, 66% improvement in time to value. Like tremendous, like absolutely awesome. Completely transformed their company. They made it to unicorn status because of that. Um, so that makes us super, super excited when we work with those types of companies.
What's the last one? What's E?
That's esprit de corps. In order to make the first four principles work well, you need leaders to find the right balance, right? You can have a perfect recipe, you can watch a cooking show, try and do the same thing that Emerald does, and it doesn't work. You got the same equipment, everything, but you need to find the right balance for your culture. So a good leader has kind of two qualities. They act as the glue and the grease. And we didn't come up with that term. Came from some work that I did in the past with a Jet Propulsion Laboratory leader who was in charge of the Mars Pathfinder project. That was his term for it. But it's the notion of, you're familiar with product market fit. This is about
Yeah,
people culture fit.
yeah.
So that's, esprit de corps, and Pablo has a unique perspective on this. But really, it's do the individual values meet the company values, the team values, and there's kind of a force multiplier that brings all that together in a way that is, 1 + 1 = 3 or 4 or 5.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's something people ask us is like, well, hey, which one of these is the most important, right? Or which one is there an order I go into it? And sort of why we chose what a unicorn knows is what a unicorn knows that it is that it there is no order, right? Just depending on what you need to focus on, what is most critical for you, you're choosing where you need to focus, right? You might be using all five of them, but I love Esprit de Corps because it is the glue that sort of holds everything together. Having worked in various companies, like those that have the strongest leaders, build the strongest culture, drive these values, allow people. I mean, think about what we just talked about. Like you're relinquishing and lean the ability for a very junior person to come to an idea which might transform the company, right? How many companies actually do that? Or do they go, nope, got to be an SVP or C level to make all the decisions? Like we're the smartest people, right? It takes a lot to trust your people and to build that culture. So culture and leadership is actually absolutely very critical.
Look, I remember when I was doing my MBA, I was at Glaxo and came up with some interesting multivariate analysis of way in which we could change the sales model. And so I got very excited because it showed that my time was being wasted, I thought. So I went to my boss and he said, I don't understand what you said, but we don't pay you to think like that. There are
Oh,
smarter
wow.
people than you in head office. That's their job. Please just go back and do what you were told to do. So, of
Yeah,
course, I completely ignored him, did what I thought was the right thing to do, and we ended up being team of the year.
that's
Worked less hard and got more prescriptions written
yeah,
for our products.
Perfect.
yeah.
And it's
Neat.
just, but you're right. It's like, it completely stifles people if
Yeah.
zero innovation. What are your, as you think about the examples in the book, like that one where you had sort of 60% improvement in go to market, what else? What are some of the other just astonishing successes that you've had?
Um, Matt, what about like on strategy? I think where companies fall down on strategy is again, I think ego kills a lot of things, right? Like we know everything. We don't need help. But when you have leadership that says, "Hey, let's bring the leadership team in. Like, are we heading in the right direction? Do we need to change course to win?" Um, I think being open to change. I think that where we've had more success in strategies, where you have CEOs that really want help from as many people and they don't pretend that they know everything. I think when you've got leaders who think like I'm the only person who can decide the direction of the company because I'm the CEO, that's expected of me. Um, that's where I've seen at least Matt transform things from a strategy perspective.
Do you, do you have CEOs in the portfolio then who are more or less receptive to your offers of help, or is
Yeah,
it
so it's
compulsory that they allow you to help them?
no, I think it's not compulsory, right? I think the way that Insight engages is very collaborative. Um, and I'd honestly say 95% of the time people want help, right? Because we offer this, right? When they take
Yeah,
Insight money, they know it's part of the value prop, and like we're here to help. If you're smart, no matter how smart you are, doesn't matter if you've been a multi-time CEO or CRO or CMO. It's a free resource, right, to help you and your team get better. But there's always people who think, I don't need that. If I ask for help, what are they going to think? Honestly, if they don't ask for help, what are they going to think, right? So
yeah.
I don't know why you wouldn't, but I think we've been very lucky at Insight where we've built a culture. The CEOs know that where the highest majority are always asking for input.
Matt, Pablo was setting you up there to talk about strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it's I am a not a fan of the traditional management consulting approach, and I'm so happy to be at a place that kind of agrees with that. So we work from the inside out. So if you think about like the granddaddy consulting firms of the world, what they'll do is they'll charge a whole bunch of money and they'll spend time with each of whoever they need to interview, and they'll pluck out the best ideas, feed them back in a recommendation. And all that takes a very, very long period of time and a lot of money. What we can do in a day, and the reason why this works so well is because I am the dumbest guy in the room. My job is simply to pull out the best thinking of those around the table or around the maps that we use. And it never fails. You talk about success stories, that there is an aha moment in the room where simply because people have gotten together in a way that they usually don't because of the silos that Pablo mentioned, and they're discussing strategic challenges and the options for resolving those. It may not happen in the room, but down the line, stuff that would take months and potentially never actually happen in the old consulting model where someone gives you some recommendations, it happens, and it happens very, very quickly in a fraction of the time and a fraction of the cost. And it's because they have such emotional and intellectual investment in the choices that they've made, the strategy that they've crafted. It's guaranteed to have that buy-in, and it's just a matter of deploying it to the rest of the company. So,
The
100% of the time, there's this aha moment where they're scratching their head, saying something like, or a slap to the forehead is like, "Why are we doing that? Or why haven't we know? Oh my gosh!" And if it doesn't happen in the workshop, it happens downstream in follow-up sessions. So almost every time it's a success story, depending on how you define success. So I'm not
I
worried
love
about the most brilliant strategy. I'm worried about the synergy and the esprit de corps that happens, because out of that comes good strategy, comes good culture, comes good experimentation. So I know
I
it comes
love
off.
I love that because you said, look, I'm the dumbest person in the room, which is obviously not true, but that's totally counter intuitive to the large management consultancies where they are compelled to prove always that they are the smartest people in the room, because
Yeah,
that's sort of why you've hired them.
correct.
And also, if they don't show up with a few people, right, they
Yeah,
don't get to charge the big bucks. So it's a big, complicated process with lots of people involved.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, very different. Do your is it? Are you a free service to the portfolio, or do you is there a do they
Yeah, no,
are
so
you
for Insight, it is part of just being part of Insight. So we do not,
fab?
yeah, so it's a little different model than some other companies, but that also allows us to, engage in a very collaborative way versus, oh, if I call Matt or if I call, somebody else, like what's going to
They're
happen?
going to
So,
ding me with a management fee.
yeah, no, exactly. It's we want them to feel like we're an extension of the team. Obviously, we're holding them accountable and pushing them right to top line and bottom line goals. But it does build a much more collaborative environment.
Yeah,
Fab.
it's complete pull, complete, but we're not pushing anything. It's a
Yeah.
complete pull
And are
system.
you? You've got no more because it wouldn't be lean if you had more resources than you had demand. So you have just enough resources to meet the demand. Hence why it can. You're not having to push because it's not like you've got people sitting around doing nothing.
Correct.
Um,
So,
And we practice what we preach. I mean, the advisory side of the house has grown enormously over the last few years, and Pablo's superpower really is putting together the teams, the kind of the SEAL team squads, if you will, that fits the advisory talent with the portfolio company need, and
yeah.
finding just the right people to do that. That's I hope I don't embarrass him, but that esprit de corps is his superpower. We just got back from a cross company cross because we're growing, right? So we had to make sure that the esprit de corps is in place, and we
Yeah.
just spent some quality time together, about 3.5 days a couple weeks ago, to do that very thing.
yeah,
Very
to your
good.
point about scaling with lean, like we try to scale where there's demand, right? We provide supply where there's demand versus I think a lot of teams, even in companies, try to add supply before there is demand to try and plan ahead. But if you've got visibility into demand, you can sort of keep up. And that's sort of been how we've tried to scale the organization over the last couple of years to keep up with, portfolio growth and what the people need to actually continue to scale effectively.
Fab. Guys, what is it you know now that you wish you'd known earlier?
Matt?
In general, I mentioned that I spend a good bit of time with Toyota, and going into that engagement, it's been 20 plus years ago. I thought I pretty much knew a lot about problem solving, and how to solve problems, and was pretty good at it. And I realized in working there that I knew nothing about how to do it, or how to engage people around problem solving, and the lens through which you need to look at problems. And so, in the middle of this 8, 9 year engagement, I had this kind of pivotal moment where I had my own slap to the forehead. Thinking I'm looking at the world the wrong way. It's not what more I can do or what I can add to the equation. It's what do I need to take away, and that's the entire approach of lean, is subtraction, right? What can you remove to do better? And that's I wish I had known that for the first 15 years of my career, because I would have had much greater impact. So, and it's guided everything that I've written, everything I've done. It's the reason that Pablo and I have been working together this long, and why it's worked so well. So,
Fab.
Cool. For me, it's hire slow, fire fast. I think as managers, you learn that people tell you that, but like you have to experience it. And even now, right, we coach a lot on if you don't have the right team, you got to make changes because the pain is going to be worse if you're not upgrading or top leveling your people. But I wish I would have adhered to that earlier in my career.
Okay. And other than what a unicorn knows, what else should people? What else do you recommend? What do you like? What was the inspired you ahead of writing the book? Matt, feel free to throw some of your own other books in.
No, no, no,
What
nothing
else?
needed.
What else should people be reading?
No, 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 no. We were chatting about this earlier. Don't laugh at me for saying this, but I actually bought Arnold Schwarzenegger's book, which is actually a kind of a motivate. I guess he's on his fourth career as kind of a motivational guru now. But
Yeah.
there's actually some good practical stuff in it that I actually haven't seen before in the typical fodder around productivity and professionalism and dedication, blah blah blah. So
What's it
um,
called?
I'm not telling you. Figure it out.
We'll pick it up in the show notes. We'll pick it up in the show notes.
I don't want to
Fab.
sell it.
Yeah, I just finished reading, I think it came out last year, Matthew McConaughey's book, Green Lights,
Yeah.
which is, again, I tend to read a lot of business books and business magazines, so sometimes it's nice to read things about life experiences that you can also apply to business. But Phenomenal book, and I think he just released a book, a children's book called Just Because, which also highly recommend for those of you that have kids. But there's a lot of phenomenal parables that apply to adults as well. Like it's designed for kids, but phenomenal. I don't know what this guy's doing. He said I was listening to a podcast and he was sleeping and he had an idea and just started jotting down just because this, and so he wrote a children's book. But he's very, again, phenomenal actor, but very and great philanthropist, but phenomenal way of thinking about life and the journey, the human journey, etc. So highly recommend those two books.
Fab. Well, guys, thank you very much indeed for giving me your time and giving us giving the audience a run through the book. Thoroughly recommend the book. Excellent read. Well done. Guys, thanks very much for your time. Been brilliant chatting to you.
Likewise, thank you.